Hello. Okay, well, if you saw my earlier videos, or I guess even if you haven't, then hopefully you're already fairly knowledgeable about kilts, and I don't have to explain too obviously basic of a. But this is the essence of the true kilt, I guess, and where it gets confused by Hollywood and our own ideas or limitations, or whatever. uh, it said in one of the earlier videos, that I had written blogs about this a long time ago, and I wasn't sure if I should, just read those blogs, and I've chosen not to do that yet. I haven't printed them out or whatever. They would need a lot of editing, and I don't know that it would make for the most entertaining content until I really get a chance to go back and do that. So this video, a little unscripted, a little, kind of what's obvious. Well, when I was to back up in a couple of these photos that I have, I'm just going to kind of do a slideshow at the end and try, instead of trying to intersperse the pictures. That just makes the video process take way longer, and you'll get the idea when you just look at the pictures. So it's a lot faster if I just put them all at the end. So when I was a kid, I went out in my bathrobe, which had a tartan on it, but I was not trying to be a Highlander in these photos. I was trying to be Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker had like a poncho, and Obi-Wan had like a robe. So I figured my robe was a good enough a robe. But for whatever reason, I had this tartan robe, and I, really liked that tartan look even back then. And I didn't know that it was, so much ascribed to an actual heritage thing or whatever. And so then when I saw these pictures again years later, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was, a tartan robe. It almost looks like I'm a cloud, Here I am being Highlander, long before Highlander was a thing. But like I said, at the time, it wasn't supposed to be Highlander. It was supposed to be Jedi. But flash, forward, this has been, pretty well covered on at least one other channel, the Braveheart effect, as they call it. And yeah, so I was part of that, I guess, but also I think I might have mentioned this in the earlier video. I don't remember. I had friends who did Scottish themed holiday party, and I didn't have any Scottish stuff, but I kind of wanted a kilt that I could wear to their party. Like the first year, we all kind of went in regular clothes and didn't know they were all going to be all dressed up. And it was like, oh wow, everybody's all, not fancy, but like thematic and semi fancy. And we didn't know that was the gig. So the next year, I really wanted to get a kilt so I could, show them my kilt. Yeah, I got one too. And, they had not even had real kilts. They were too expensive. They had actually gone to thrift stores and found like Catholic girl skirts and modified them or whatever. Like I said, I'm positive I mentioned this in the previous video, but if you're finding this one first, then whatever. And so I never found one that would fit. I had a couple that were real wool skirts that had belonged to my mom or my aunts or whatever, but they were just way too narrow. There was no way to make that work. Even though I liked the patterns of it, that was just not going to happen. Even as slim, skinny as I was then. And so yeah, the idea kind of fell by the wayside. But there was a Scottish store, and so I had gone, and I literally did speak about most of this in the first video, but again, it's relevant here. And so I had gone to her, and I didn't understand kind of the difference between like the kilt and the great kilt so much then, but I was pretty sure I wanted like what Braveheart had, or what there was like a sweeping thing, and like then there was all this thing, and and so I think she was going to sell me a great kilt, and I think I was in for more than I had bargained for when I had received this giant blanket. I wouldn't have known what the hell to do with the extra half of the wrap that goes on the other arm, because the Braveheart one is not a true real kilt. They did some Hollywood stuff where they modified even that. And then it was just cost prohibitive, at the time. There was no internet, there was no comparison shopping. It was just literally way out of your price range. I like to think she said $600 or $800, which my neighbor literally said you could have gone to Scotland for that kind of money in those days. Yes, you could have, literally. I don't know that you would have been able to also buy a kilt or a cheaper kilt, but because you probably would have ended up on, the Royal Mile at the whims of whatever those merchants can sell stuff to tourists for. I don't know. Again, what the price really should have been at the time. So then, fast forward again a few more years, and I had not seen Outlander, but I had seen, Rob Roy, and there's a scene in Rob Roy where it seems like he takes off like a top piece, like there's two separate pieces, and so I always thought there was some sort of separate piece. I'd have to watch it again. I'm not sure if he just kind of drapes it or if he actually does it, but I'm positive he actually removes a chunk and puts it aside. So how they, rectify that, I'm not sure. Some astute person will go, blah, 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 keyboard warrior. How did you not catch what he actually did? But so I always thought, okay, yeah, you have to have the brooch here, you have to have the sweeping drape here. That's part of the kilt, and how that actually came out of the kilt, I don't know. And then I had seen some videos where guys were trying to construct their own kilt, and they had figured out a way to kind of do that. It was more similar to the Braveheart kilt, so where they did have this fabric swing up, but then the front apron wasn't correct, and so it was kind of a longer. I think it was just a longer filla bag, and then they had, instead of leaving the end down, they had just brought it up or something. I don't recall. It was like 3 years ago when I watched this, or maybe more actually. Yeah, probably more like 5. And so when I first bought kilts, like on Amazon, I just bought the basic tailored style acrylic kilt, and then I bought the matching fly plate, and I thought the fly plate was the thing that you could drape like that. And I tried to do a few photos where it looks like that, and I posted a couple of them, I think, in the previous video also, and so some of them will be in this slideshow too. And so I blundered along as that for a little while, and then I was, looking on just Yahoo kilt searches, and you'd see things like the piratey shirt, or what they call the ghillie shirt or the Highland shirt, with the Highland vest, which has like some kind of arm greaves or something, and it isn't cut like a business vest, and it isn't quite cut like a pirate vest. I think it's meant to be worn, kind of open. And so if you want more of a swashbuckling look, like that's kind of available. And I always thought, well, if you're going to call it a chieftain vest, I think is what they call it, you better be a pretty badass dude to be calling yourself a chieftain, So I don't know how much that's caught on with, guys who want to look a little more traditionally Victorian or whatever, which is sort of the standard dressy kilt look, but also technically can be considered costumey, because again, you're going for a throwback look to a degree, whereas a modern look I thought was, again, when in the previous video I talk about how, I thought a Prince Charlie jacket was the jacket, and then the Highland vest was like the vest, and then the Argyle vest and jacket combination I always correlated with bagpipers, because it's just what you always saw them wear. So I just assumed that was automatically for bagpipers, along with the Glengarry hat instead of the, a Balmoral or something hat. Like that was a bagpiper thing. This was, I didn't understand that you can kind of mix and match some of these things, yada, yada, yada. But then I could also see how where like certain items, you can combine them, but then you're just basically covering everything over with all this fabric. So what's the point of having all this under detail? The true period and actor types will, be down to the minutia, and you won't know that they're wearing the correct under thing and this and that and this and that. But it does, I guess, help the look when it's all on and together. So fast forward a little bit more, I had gone on Amazon and found some period-esque, maybe meant to be pirate jackets, maybe meant to be colonial jackets, I don't know. And I was able to get one of those sort of modified to look more like the jacket that Jamie wears in Outlander. Again, I hadn't really seen the show, but I had seen some stills and I liked the look. I was like, oh, But of course, the tailor didn't understand what I was trying to do, so they actually removed some of the ornamentation that I paid extra to get. It's like, no, I wanted all these buttons and fake buttonholes and things. That was the whole point of buying this stupid thing. Not just the brocade looking fabric, it's these colonial details. Hello, so when you're dealing with people who aren't familiar with this subject matter or don't necessarily speak English as their first language, you run into all these kind of issues. So anyway, to backtrack, if you don't know, literally a great kilt is, just a length of tartan. This is just a sample of tartan. Here's brown watch. This is acrylic. This is like $10 a yard. Also, this was a kilt that pretty much fell apart and I tore apart. That's not quite great kilt length, but it is Philibeg length. I can wrap this around myself and put a belt, and this will literally work. Or conversely, if I'm wearing a tailored kilt of this same tartan, I can just wear this as a blanket over as what they call the laird's plaid or whatever. And this is even cheaper acrylic fabric, so how much you want to spend is going to sort of dictate how much. And so if you're jumping up now to full kilt wool 11 ounce or 13 ounce, you're jumping way up from about $70 for enough of this to between 300 and $600. So be ready. And some of the mills don't have the double width cloth, so you have to navigate that. So if you just order fabric by the yard, a lot of times they'll send you a single width again, which will be 24 instead of 56, and it won't work. It'll be a skirt, not a blanket or a tarp. Another thing that I found out the hard way is when you start trying to coordinate your headwear with the thing, like regular neckties and regular hats won't look as authentic as you think they will, even if you buy the cool subdued colors to kind of match your earthy tartan. That's well, this is kind of like the one Jamie wore or Rob Roy had in the movie, because the real Rob Roy movie tartan was a tweed creation by a mill, not based on the two McGregor tartans that currently most popularly exist. Blah blah blah. You find out all these things as you stumble through your journey. And, so in the end result, I had found tweed. Or I'm sorry. Well, I think tweed might be a slightly actually more accurate fabric than a worsted wool fabric. The woolen wool being the more blanket weave. Again, these are acrylic, but tartan typically being on a more rigid, what's called worsted wool. But for practical costuming purposes or going to Ren fairs or festivals or something like that, typically you don't need that much heavy of a fabric. You'll sweat to death. So most people tend to wear, I guess, an 11-ounce tartan instead of a tweed woven. But you're still looking, like I said, probably closer to $500. The acrylic will make you sweat a lot more. I think there are some people now with the internet, yay, who can just put these looks together much faster and much easier with less trial and error than I kind of blundered through. There's so many more people posting about this kind of stuff now than, like I said, even 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I was lucky to find 2 or 3 people who were posting anything that looked remotely correct. And now I think it's kind of exploded. So this video is almost like an afterthought where people are like, dude, you're doing it wrong. Yeah, okay, fine. I'm not even doing it at all. Like I said in the other video, I have yet to want to wear a great kilt to a festival because I think that's just going to create issues trying to get dressed after I use the restroom. There are easier ways to put on the kilt, though, the great kilt, speaking specifically, than what they show in the Outlander, where he spreads the whole thing across the floor. And some people have said they used belt loops, and some people have said they used drawstrings. I think all you really need is a rock, and if you're just not that particular about the pleating, it's pretty easy to put the belt down, or even a piece of rope or whatever, if you, however authentic and friar tuck you want to look. And then just kind of throw it on, and you can kind of readjust it once it's already on. It really doesn't take me more than 3 minutes to get the kilt kind of adjusted if I'm not worried about the pleatings looking very straight. But like I said, as a practical garment, I just don't think it works well in that environment. I'm not at a clan booth, where I'm trying to look a specific way. I'm just walking around, and trying to enjoy myself. So I really don't want to think that much about, my, you know, am I going to be exposed? Am I going to have, issues? Da, da, da. I'd rather just wear a tailored kilt and a nice vest and leave it at that. But as far as actually getting dressed in it, no, it really isn't that complicated where you're going to spend 20 minutes and have this length of a floor space, especially if you're a farmer and all you have is a one room cottage. You don't you don't have this elaborate getting dressed procedure in the morning. I think that's been pretty well debunked, that maybe there was some, nobles who, or whatever, who did that later, and maybe that's how some of these conventions came about, like, oh, how can I make this prettier, and but as they even said in, one of their other videos on the USA kilts, uh the original pleating on kilts when they were first sewn down wasn't uniform and organized. It was a hodgepodge mess. So clearly that didn't happen until the late 1800s, at least, or whatever, when people finally started going, oh, it would be much prettier. And again, the military probably did that first because they pleated to the stripe, and then that probably filtered into the less, like, again, when I got this one, it was pleated to the stripe because there's a white stripe, and which is very surprising for a cheap 5 yard kilt of acrylic material to actually see it pleated to a stripe. kind of a miracle. And so I think I had a point earlier and kind of forgot what it was, but it doesn't matter. But yeah, so like I said in the other video, I'm typically not wearing period authentic footwear with this. A necktie is not going to work with this unless you are, again, doing the tailored kilt with just the blanket, and then you'll probably find the blanket cumbersome to carry around. But when you're doing the full wrap and all that, it's just not meant to be worn with a 20th century necktie. And the the bonnet hats, I bought a couple of the tartan bonnet hats that I thought would go fine with a regular tailored kilt, and then realized, oh, I'm actually trying to bring costumey elements into a more office casual look. So, okay, I didn't need these after all. This is for this. This is for this. I learned how to separate the two looks a lot better, and like I said, refine my style to more what can still be viewed as kind of a vintage look, but using more modern elements than just a straight up costume. What I did find, instead of the Highland shirt with the gussets and the collar, it depends. If I'm doing like a yard sale, I'll wear something that kind of resembles a ghillie shirt with a tailored kilt, and then it'll have a little bit more of a throwback look. And the reason I'm doing that is just because the shirt will have pockets, and I don't have to wear a jacket, so I'm not sweating to death while I'm trying to do. And I'm just using yard sale as, kind of a weird example, but like if I need somewhere to put a little bit of extra money or whatever, I have pockets with flaps here. But it's not a true Highland shirt at all. But nobody can tell. It looks kind of Highlandy. Or there's a lot of shirts that are not costumes. Well, I don't know how traditional they are or how casual they are in the other cultures, but like there's kind of Mexican wedding shirts and things, or maybe they're South American. I'm not entirely positive. But I used to see them in Venice Beach all the time, and they had kind of a Ren Fair look. They had kind of billowy sleeves and a little kind of a Henley button thing here, but then they'd have ornamentation. And I found slightly less ornate versions of those that Peterman calls the Otovalo mountain shirt, I believe. So if you want to look at those might work a little bit better than the ghillie shirts, or and they not always cotton. I think sometimes there might be a linen, but you're not finding polyester in them, which is the kind of the main drawback of the ghillie shirt. Like the ghillie shirt and the big brooch, that's literally all from Brigadoon. Like as far as I know, like that came in around the 50s, and hardly anybody has like seen this movie in recent years. And then you finally see it and go, oh, okay, they got this idea from Outlander from that. They got this idea from that. They got this, you know. And so this old movie, if you haven't seen it, Brigadoon, it's a musical, and it's very, a lot of dancing, a lot of costumey, tartans flying in the wind kind of stuff. And so like I said, I that was not what I was trying to pattern my outfits after intentionally, because I hadn't seen it, but unintentionally, that was where a lot of the stuff that I thought was Highland outfits came from. So yeah. So, in a word, Brigadoon, watch it, and then don't do it. That's to be to be basic. Yeah, okay. So I guess we've gone on a little bit long. I think I wanted to talk a little bit about hose and jackets. Um, I mean, there's not much to say. I mean, unless you can really afford, some fancy diced hose or some kind of different kind of argyle hose or something that's really going to set off the outfit, you're kind of stuck with just generic hose that, you're going to spend the $30 or whatever. Don't stress about that. There's no getting around it. Either you want to spend like $100 on hose, or you don't. Like I said, the jackets. I talked about vests instead of jackets more. Well, I talked about Charlie and Argyle a little bit. Basically, these are not traditional old styles. These are 20th century styles. So if you're looking for jackets and you really, really, really want to commit to a look, you have to figure out if it's going to be a military look or a civilian look. Then you have to you have to do some research in there. I have not collected any extensive true, like I said, I found those literal costume things on Amazon and converted them to look like uh, Outlander pieces, but I didn't. I wasn't gonna go overboard and spend more than 100 and whatever bucks, however much it cost at the tailor to add to this. What I don't know, the jacket was probably 40 or $70 or whatever an Amazon jacket goes for, and then the tailor was probably another $80 or something to cut it and tweak it a little bit. That was literally the most I was gonna do with that. And so, like I said, so photos to follow.